Travel in Calliope. 1G acceleration. One of the small mercies of Calliope is that fuel is plentiful and drives are efficient. You can generally accelerate under a constant 1G thrust until you're halfway to your destination, then flip over and decelerate for the other half. This not only makes for speedy transit, it provides something close to regular gravity for all but a couple of minutes in the middle. 2G acceleration. When time is of the essence, an interplanetary mission can operate at 2G thrust for short periods, up to a few days. This is unpleasant for humans. Ship crews must wear exoskeletons or remain confined to hard suit at all times. Basic physical activities like showering, handling objects, or pouring oneself a drink become hazards, as objects are twice as heavy and accelerate twice as fast. Travel under 2G thrust also has an unfortunate cost-benefit ratio because of the way acceleration works. It's far more effective the further you have to travel, but long trips are the ones you least want to make at 2G. Sisus who run at 2G for more than 6 hours arrive at their destination, reduced to half their normal pilot H-page. Nearlight Bolt. The Seas will not have access to near-light travel early in the campaign. While their ship, the Dragon's Tooth, is capable of it, it doesn't have the necessary K couches and automedical equipment to make a Bolt survivable. The Seas will obtain this gear at the end of Mission 4. Even once the ship has the equipment installed, it should be made clear to the CCs that even in ideal circumstances, a Bolt is a very unpleasant experience. Of course, they're PCS, so they never die in the process, but doing so reduces them to 1 pilot H-page if you're using bonds. Field Guide to the Karakin Trade Baronies, page 86. It instead causes 4 stress. That being said, there's no faster way to get to a destination. Furthermore, a ship in Bolt will arrive only a few seconds behind the light, carrying the information of its approach. If you calculate your exit point well, it's one of the very few ways of launching a genuine surprise attack in space. Note that the time listed in the chart is the time passed from an external, real space perspective. Due to the effect of time dilation at relativistic speeds, time passed from the traveler's perspective will be significantly shorter. If it's necessary to know how much time passed from the traveler's frame of reference, divide the external time by 10. For example, a trip that takes 60 minutes from an external perspective will only seem to take 6 minutes from the traveler's perspective. There is a minimum safe distance to target for plotting a near-light bolt, the Unkobo limit, which is generally around 10 light minutes. Due to time dilation, at distances less than the Unkobo limit, ships do not have enough time to flip around for deceleration. Even if they could, passengers would be exposed to acceleration and deceleration shock too rapidly to ensure survival. Technology in Calliope. General tech level. Calliope is a bizarre mixture of the new and the old. The bleeding edge butts up against things so ancient they might have been invented by pre-fall humanity. When everyone in the system has to live with the constant threat of a hostile environment leaking in and killing them, reliability is valued over novelty. A lot of major systems run on processors with less computational power than a slate, because they're much easier to manufacture and incredibly reliable. Many maintenance consoles have a user interface no more advanced than monochrome command line. A whole lot of stuff is bulky, boxy, with large components and friction-fit tabs that can be easily serviced by hand. Anything vital needs to be easy to maintain or replace. It's often difficult to get exact parts, so Calliopean tech has a distinctive, cobbled-together look. People make do with what they have, even if it looks weird or ugly. Life support. Most Calliopeans agree that there are 3 essential things without which life becomes untenable. In order of decreasing urgency, they are air, water, and food. The most urgent is air. Most stations recycle air either through plant photosynthesis or Bosch reactors. Plant photosynthesis usually happens anyway as a result of agricultural activity, but most stations don't have enough plants to make the loop fully self-sustaining. Bosch reactors take in carbon dioxide and elemental hydrogen to produce pure water and elemental carbon. The water is then electrolyzed, splitting it into oxygen and hydrogen. The oxygen is fed into the air, while the hydrogen is recycled back into the reactor. Only the larger settlements have the equipment and materials required to recycle sewage into potable water. Smaller stations usually have to make do with small-scale filtration and vacuum distillation, alongside regular infusions of fresh water. Fresh water in Calliope is usually obtained by mining ice from moons in the outer system. Before its retirement, the CPS Borealis did this on a massive scale with Kalevala's ring system. Larger stations have dedicated agriculture sectors that use a combination of conventional soil and hydroponics to grow fruits, vegetables, and staple crops. Smaller stations have to make do with running grow houses in whatever space they can find. Many of the system's smallest settlements rely on regular shipments from a larger agricultural provider. This usually means impact dynamics, especially in recent years. Spaceships operating in Calliope tend to be quite self-sufficient. Most have the ability to recycle water and air, and the larger ones may even have grow boxes to supplement food supplies. Even short-range vessels that pack light can keep their crews breathing and watered for a few days in an emergency, while some dedicated long-haul ships can last for months. A lot of Calliope's repurposed colony vessels have cryogenic pause tanks, which were originally used to save on supplies during the year of subjective time it took to reach Calliope at near light. In the event of an emergency, however, they can be used as a sort of lifeboat, preserving stranded crew until rescue arrives. Power. Calliope's heartbeat is a fusion cycle, and deuterium its lifeblood. The majority of Calliope's settlements are powered by fusion reactors, and Calliopean spacecraft use fusion torch engines. Reactor fuel is one of the system's few plentiful commodities. A brutal shortage during the first wave came close to ending everything, and ever since, there has been massive intentional overproduction to allow for widespread stockpiling. While Mune-catalyzed, cold fusion is used in smaller, specialized reactors such as mechs, high-end ground vehicles, and small spacecraft. Most reactors operate on a conventional, hot deuterium-helium-3 cycle. Stable reactors are bulkier and must operate at much higher temperatures, but they're also far less prone to catastrophic failure. Because Calliope's star is dimmer than Cradle's, solar power is not viable beyond the orbit of the twins. Impact Plaza is the only major space settlement in the system to operate primarily on solar power, while on Asphodel itself, Furnace City supplements its stable reactors with fields of solar panels. Medicine and healthcare. Unfortunately, the quality of medical care in Calliope tends to be a function of wealth and location. Larger settlements just have better, more specialized facilities, the resources to maintain them, and the expertise to run them. Smaller settlements don't, and must make do with whatever they have. The bulk of pharmaceutical production is conducted by impact dynamics, although Furnace City and Hell's Gate also produce significant amounts of medicine. They don't sell anywhere near as much because most of their supply goes towards their own residents. Diseases can spread like wildfire in the closed-loop environments of space stations, so most of the major settlements have mandatory vaccination programs. In fact, it's notable as being one of the few services that the icebreaker Borealis offers free of charge. Nobody makes a profit if the guests keep getting the flu. For a pilot in the field, first aid and emergency medical gear is much the same as anywhere else in the galaxy. Pre-packaged kits full of fast-acting patches or sprays, pre-loaded injectors, and bags of synthetic blood. Most people assume that medical science in Calliope lags about 10 to 30 years behind whatever's in vogue on the core worlds. While this is largely true, The system is also notorious as a refuge for disgraced fringe practitioners seeking a place with lax ethical standards, where it's difficult to prove whether or not you lost your medical license. This means that highly experimental treatments are available at a low price if you know who to ask and are unafraid of risk. Augmentation. Prosthetics and cybernetic enhancements are nearly ubiquitous in Calliope. Individuals who spend long periods in low or zero-gravity environments need extensive musculoskeletal augmentation to be able to survive on 1G stations or spaceships. Working in the system's factories and mines is dangerous, as is space combat. People lose arms, legs, or eyes, and need replacements to get their lives back. Most mech pilots have at least a basic temporal or occipital uplink jack, and professionals usually have a more comprehensive set of neural implants. However, there are non-invasive methods of neural uplink, the most common being magnetic resonance suites installed in hard-suit helmets. Pilots who eschew direct connection don't have any noticeable difference in combat performance over their augmented peers, though there are armchair strategists who insist that so-called vegan pilots experience higher signal latency. As with other technology in Calliope, 3 elements are paramount: what's reliable, what's available, and what's affordable. Augmentation and prosthetics aren't always the prettiest or the most cutting edge, but they're usually older, tried and tested models that are easy to repair and maintain. This utilitarianism isn't total, though. SSC has a fully stocked outlet in the system, and some of the system's richer residents kit themselves out with the bleeding edge. Manufacturing. Almost every settlement will have some kind of trade, even if it's just selling scrap metal. In fact, smaller settlements are likely to be defined by their trade, since they won't have the resources or people to diversify. Even the bigger settlements still revolve mostly around one industry or group of industries. Hell's Gate has mining and refining. Impact Plaza has agriculture. Endymion's Lament has gas harvesting, and so on. Calliope has more printers than the average long-rim systems, a byproduct of the organized colonial effort that the rest of the region lacked. Most Calliopean printers are small, poorly maintained, and don't meet Union's current Schedule 1 specification. A common joke states that most Calliopean printers are Schedule 0.5. Only the 6 largest settlements have Schedule 2 printers, and only 3 Schedule 3 printers are known to exist in Calliope. Even when settlements have printers, they're usually struggling to keep up with the needs of their own residents, let alone other customers. To fill the gap, there's a large conventional manufacturing industry that caters to systems needs. It's a tangled, messy affair, with a bunch of corporate subsidiaries rubbing shoulders with independent local operations, in which there is almost no standardization or regulation. The lion's share of space-side manufacturing happens in Stygia's orbit or close to it. Hell's Gate is where most of the raw materials come from, after all. Planet-side manufacturing takes place almost entirely in or around Furnace City on Asphodel. Communications. Communication in Calliope works at 2 speeds, Omni and light speed. The OmniNet transmits signals through blink space and is instantaneous regardless of distance, so long as both parties are close to an OmniNode or have an OmniHook. Anyone in the galaxy can be contacted with no delay. However, like the rest of the long rim, Calliope is subject to phenomena known as blink voids. Though rare, blink voids can disrupt omni communication for hours, days, weeks, or occasionally even months at a time. Additionally, the requirement of being close to an OmniNode or possessing an OmniHook is something Calliope's poorer settlements can't always manage. Light-speed communication involves the use of radio waves, or light. This is, as the name suggests, limited to the speed of light, meaning that it can take hours for signals to reach in-system destinations, while those sent out of system will take years or decades. On the upside, Because Calliope was first colonized during an unusual decades-long gigavoid, it has an incredibly robust light-speed communications network, with a sprawling array of satellites, data centers, and repeater stations. Line of sight is largely irrelevant in Calliope. Unless you're deep underground, you always have line of sight to at least one satellite. LS to Omni is a mixture of these methods, light-speed connection to the nearest Omni node. This is how the majority of orbital habitats in Calliope operate. Impact Dynamics and the icebreaker Borealis used to charge exorbitant rates for Omni service, while Hell's Gate, Endymion's Lament and Furnace City offered much more reasonable fees, albeit for a less reliable service. More recently, Union built a neutral Omni node close to the star that offers unlimited access for free, but its central location means that any settlement in the outer system experiences hours of delay. Most citizens agree the savings are worth the extra wait, though. The Muse. In addition to the galaxy-spanning OmniNet, Calliope has its own local network, the Muse, spread across 1,000 servers, co-opted satellites, and jailbroken smart fridges. It was established during the first wave, in the middle of the decades-long gigavoid, to enable system-wide communication. The Muse had to be hacked together from whatever was available, mismatched software architectures from a dozen different colonial expeditions, running on repurposed hardware not originally designed for the task. In the early years of the colonization, nobody had the time or resources to standardize anything. During the Pyrite Age, the Calliope project greatly expanded the Muse for their own purposes, and some of their modifications to the system outlasted the project itself. As a result of this history, the Muse is a disjointed mess of competing protocols and software. Nonetheless, it contains an enduring record of 3 centuries of the system's accumulated knowledge and culture. More than once, life-saving information has been dredged out of the Muse from a post on an old bulletin board that lay dormant for 200 years. Sensors and monitoring. An adage as old as the first space programs on Cradle states, "There's no such thing as stealth in space." While this is true in a technical sense, it relies upon one core assumption, that somebody's actually looking. That's not something you can take for granted in Calliope. Fusion torch burns are extremely bright, essentially impossible to miss, even if you're not looking for them, and they leave an exhaust plume that's thermally active for several hours afterwards. Likewise, a ship with an active reactor must have its heat rejection systems running, which will glow brightly in the infrared band. However, maneuvering thruster bursts can sometimes escape notice if they're done at the right times, or if there's other phenomena hiding them. During the early colonial days, traffic monitoring wasn't high on the list of priorities. The vast majority of Calliope's early telescopes and survey satellites were looking for useful resources. It was assumed that if a ship was making a maneuver, it would tell anyone who needed to know. This means that large parts of Calliope's early traffic history is unrecorded. A couple of vessels quite literally vanished, the most famous being the Persimmon Impact Dynamics colony sheet page nowadays. Most major settlements have at least one dedicated deep sky survey satellite. Artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence in Calliope works, at least in practical terms, the same as it does in other parts of the galaxy. Most people interact with non-sentient AI on a daily basis. The thing is, in most parts of the galaxy, when you talk to an artificial intelligence, you might not even realize you're doing it. Virtual assistants are pretty good at holding conversations nowadays. In Calliope, you know when you're talking to an AI and most likely wish you weren't. It's almost impossible to obtain a standard pattern GMS comp/con class assistant unit in Calliope. Back during the Pyrite era, this was because the Calliope project would only permit their own version to be manufactured. Nowadays, though, you should just be able to print or manufacture the relevant hardware and download a software profile from the OmniNet. For reasons not well understood by the system's residents, this process doesn't work. Almost every time, it produces a comp/con loaded with the Calliope project profile instead. Worse, comp/cons from outside the system that spend any meaningful length of time in Calliope are in danger of assuming the Calliope project profile as well. Rumored explanations range from regional exclusivity contracts that are still legally binding to the regional update server getting spiked with exotic malware. GMS dispatched a technical team to investigate the issue 60 years ago. Nobody's sure what happened to them. But the problem was not fixed, and the relevant support ticket is still open. Mechanically speaking, Calliope project comp/cons are identical to the comp/con class assistant unit, Lancer, page 120. The only difference is that they're always upbeat, optimistic, and extremely annoying. They also sometimes experience glitches, where it briefly sounds like a different profile is talking. Non-human persons. NHPs are present in Calliope, and just like everyone else, they have to pitch in to keep the system alive. Many are holdovers from the Pyrite Age, or even the first and second waves, although a small number have arrived during the Void Age as well. As far as human attitudes go, most Calliopeans treat NHPs much the same as they do other people. Sure, they might be illegal shapes that live in space boxes, but that isn't their fault, and it's probably not even the weirdest thing a Calliopean has going on. Plus, they're very useful around a station, so most people are positively inclined towards them, so long as they're not having a bad day, playing dominoes, leaving via the window, acknowledging the elephant, or any number of other colorful euphemisms for cascading. Due to the lack of union infrastructure, many NHPs have not had proper Ballwinder-Bola-O tests in decades, or centuries. Many of their cycling schedules are ad hoc, based on folk wisdom and how an NHP feels from month to month. Space vessels. Fusion torch drives are powerful and efficient enough to provide a steady 1g of acceleration throughout a journey. This allows for both very quick transit and simulated gravity throughout, save for a few minutes in the middle, while the ship flips around to perform its deceleration burn. Fusion drives run on cryogenic deuterium-helium-3 mix, usually abbreviated to CD3ME, pronounced CD-He3, the same fuel that powers Calliope's stable reactors, which means that even in the worst of times it's cheap and plentiful. Dedicated combat ships in Calliope are a rarity, usually only operated by Impact Dynamics. The vast majority of ships used for combat started life as civilian models that received extensive and often improvised modification. Most space vessels in Calliope are at least a century old, holdovers from the Pyrite Age, which was the last time most local settlements had the money to invest in their space fleets. Counterintuitively, though, the older ships tend to be the most reliable. If they've survived this long, it's because they were built to last. They also tend to be on the smaller side. Nobody in Calliope can afford to maintain a capital ship. And even larger subline vessels are too costly for anyone but Impact Dynamics to run in any significant numbers. Mechanized Chassis. Mechanized chassis existed as civilian tools long before the Hercynian crisis, but their new application as war machines was largely irrelevant when Calliope was first colonized. For all the many hardships Calliope went through in its early years, war wasn't one of them. Nevertheless, when fighting had to be done, the people of Calliope adopted mechs the same way they adopt all technology, innovating with limited resources. Dedicated military hardware is expensive and difficult to fabricate if you don't have a printer, so most combat mechs in Calliope start life as civilian loading, mining, or maintenance rigs. Mining gear and power tools are repurposed into weaponry. Electronic warfare systems are fashioned from civilian computing hardware, running downloaded intrusion code, and everything from deck plating to office furniture can be fashioned into armor if you're determined enough. Genuine, licensed military-grade mechs are somewhat of a status symbol in Calliope, It means either you or your employer are wealthy enough to afford to buy, run, and maintain one. IPSN chassis are by far the most common, with Harrison Armory products being a rarity and SSC models almost unheard of. The number of HORUS rigs in the system is unknown. The system does have a nearly inexhaustible source of near-military-grade mechs, and the weapons to outfit them, however, impact dynamics. When the company first came to Calliope, it brought its entire arsenal with it. But after the pivot to agriculture, the entire inventory was mothballed in storage vaults scattered throughout the system. These vaults turned out to be less secure than intended, and over the next 2.5 centuries, a large number of them were raided. Impact Dynamics mechs weren't state-of-the-art even in their own era, let alone now. But they're inexpensive, easy to maintain, and are so common they could be said to grow on trees, if Calliope actually had any. For the local militia on a budget, a second-hand Raptor 4 is a perfectly reasonable choice.